Okay, it looks like some people are still joining. So actually, I'm going to give it just one more minute.
Sounds good, Nicole.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, people who are just joining, I'm going to give it just one more minute to give everyone some time to log in to the call. We'll start, like I said, it's about 1 minute. Okay, we'll go ahead and start. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today as we hear from James Slotnick, the head of U.S. Government Relations with Sunlight. We'll be discussing the first 100 days of the Biden administration and the impact on the healthcare industry. For those of you that I don't know, I'm Nicole Seamont, the compliance manager at Benefit Concepts here in Houston. I'm always here to answer any compliance-related questions you may have, and not just about the Biden administration, so anything that you have. With that said, I'll hand the call over to Sarah Warford with Sun Life to discuss a few housekeeping items before we hear from James.
Yep. Thank you so much, Nicole. First of all, we encourage questions, so please type them in the question and answer box, which is located there at the bottom of your screen. James will answer those as time allows or at the end. Any questions that come in that we're not able to get to, we'll follow up with after the event. Second, we are recording the webinar today, so we'll send a link out to watch that on demand following the event, and the slide deck will also be available. So I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, James Slotnick. He's Assistant Vice President of Government Relations at Sun Life. James represents Sun Life's interests to elected officials and regulators, focusing on issues that impact the group benefits industry. He regularly speaks to audiences across the country about the changing dynamics in Washington. And as you can imagine, he has been very busy over the past year. So with that, we'll get things started and I'll turn it over to you, James.
Great, Sarah. Thanks. Thanks for the introduction. Nicole, thanks for having us today. We certainly appreciate the opportunity. As you both mentioned, it's a pretty busy time. You know what? We're just past the 100 days. I was just confirming we're at day 104 of the Biden administration. For some people, you know, that seems like a fast 104 days. I'm sure for others it seems slower, but you know, we are at important milestone for the president, and we are right in the middle. It's a great time, you know, to do a presentation like this because things are really going to start to heat up over the next few months around this infrastructure package, which we've been hearing so much about, and why it really matters to the benefits industry and to the benefits that you're offering to your employees. Is infrastructure is going to have a pretty broad definition, as we heard the president lay out last week. It's not just the traditional roads, bridges, surface infrastructure, hard infrastructure, you know, maybe the more traditional items that you think about, but care infrastructure is also a part of what the president would like to see move forward. And a big part of that care infrastructure plan is a national paid family and medical leave program. We'll certainly spend more time on that later, but again, some things, you know, items that maybe you wouldn't think would have benefits implications are going to, and also the tail of infrastructure, of course, is the president would like to see corporate and individual income tax increases as well. And certainly, particularly on the corporate side of things, that will have an impact on your business as well. So, you know, a lot we're going to cover this afternoon. But as Sarah said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A box. You know, I'll take them as we go, but also I'll save some time at the end for questions. It is, you know, hopefully most of your kids are back in school. Mine are. I have two kids, a 9 and a 7-year-old. But one of the things that is not back right now is after school. My kids used to go to this after school program. Fantastic. So they're both home. They're under strict instructions not to come in. A lot of threats were made before this before this webinar. But if they do happen to come in, you'll just see me go on mute, absolutely scream. You won't hear that, and they'll leave immediately, remembering that I'm on this webinar here. So let's go through what we're gonna touch on this afternoon. First, we're gonna spend a few minutes really just diving into the political dynamics in DC, and it's not that one party is good or one party is bad. It's nothing like that. It's just the reality of what President Biden is trying to work with on the Democratic and Republican side, and also give you some perspective as we think about things like corporate tax increases and infrastructure, the timing of when we could see those later this year, and how, again, the makeup of Congress is going to maybe help the president get certain things through, but also hinder his ability to move other items through. Then the middle part of the presentation is where we're going to spend most of the time. That's where we're going to focus on what President Biden's agenda is going forward. We'll spend a minute on the American Rescue Plan to talk about some of the things there. Obviously, COBRA subsidies, probably the biggest item of note there. But then we'll spend the bulk of our the time today talking about infrastructure, both the surface traditional infrastructure package, which is coupled with corporate tax increases, and get into some of the details there. And then switch gears to the human infrastructure, or social infrastructure that the president would like to see. And the centerpiece of that, of course, is, again, that national paid family and medical leave program. We'll talk about what that means if you just have employees in one state, in a state like Texas, if you have employees across the country. We'll talk about what those proposals are, the timing, and again, maybe the likelihood of those things moving forward. And then finally, we won't spend too much time at the end, but we will just spend a minute looking at the 2022 midterms. They're only 557 days away. I know we're all electioned out, but certainly the midterms are hanging over both parties, and are really going to impact what the Democratic agenda is going to be for the rest of the year. And the one reason that we care about the midterms is it does give us a sense of how far the Democrats are going to push on tax increases and infrastructure, because the Democrats really have two paths. Path number one is they try to go it alone and pass as much legislation as they can using certain congressional procedures, or they try to become a little more bipartisan, work with Republicans on potentially some smaller packages. And really both of those both of those paths are going to really depend on how the Democrats feel in terms of their likelihood of holding the House and the Senate in 2022. So we have a lot that we're going to talk about today. Certainly a lot of this is going to be political in nature, but again, it's not one side or the other, colored either way. It's this is sort of how things are moving in DC, and this is how the different parties are reacting to both, and how, again, it impacts the benefit plans, the annual planning, the cash flow planning for your businesses. So we'll start off with the dynamics in DC, and certainly we're all familiar with this. With this here, Speaker Pelosi oversees a very slim majority in the House. She can really only lose 2 Democratic votes to be able to pass legislation. So it's a very narrow path that Democrats have in the House. Speaker Pelosi really has to keep them all together. And that's going to become more difficult as we get closer to the midterms. There's a lot of Democrats that are in districts that are swing districts. And so certainly, that will also hold the Democrats back, maybe from trying to enact some of their more progressive ideas. In the Senate, of course, 50-50 tie. And the Senate's really where the action is. The Speaker has shown that she's able to, hold the Democratic coalition together, relatively well. The Senate is the place where, because of all the crazy rules and procedures, you really can't pass any legislation in the Senate unless you have 10 Republicans that are on board, because you need 60 votes to end debate on a piece of legislation. And so that filibuster that is going to remain in place, it doesn't look like the Democrats are going to be able to change that, is really going to hold back much of what President Biden would like to do, except there is a special path called budget reconciliation. We're all becoming armchair Senate parliamentarians. We all, have to learn these crazy rules of the Senate. In budget reconciliation, as you certainly have heard on the news over the past few months, that's a limited path that allows certain legislation that impacts federal spending to move through the Senate with just 50 votes, or 50+1, with Vice President Harris breaking that tie. But you don't need any, there's a time limit on the end of debate for legislation that uses budget reconciliation. So because the Democrats 50 votes, they could actually pass legislation without any Republican support, so long as it goes through that budget reconciliation funnel. But I think the important thing with budget reconciliation, we're going to get into a lot more of this as we look at infrastructure, is only certain things can go through there. And again, generally speaking, something has to have a direct impact on federal spending to go through budget reconciliation. So, this is certainly not the topic of this presentation, but you've heard of, some Democrats would like to see additional seats added to the Supreme Court. Well, that obviously doesn't have a direct impact on federal spending. So increasing the number of seats on the Supreme Court is not something they can go through budget reconciliation. Now, increasing or lowering taxes, though, that obviously does have an impact, direct impact on federal spending. That would be the type of item that can use budget reconciliation. And the last thing I'll say on this is, both parties sometimes love and sometimes hate budget reconciliation. Back in 2017, when the Republicans and President Trump passed the tax cut legislation at the end of 2017, that was using budget reconciliation, and certainly Democrats weren't a huge fan of budget reconciliation when that was being used then. However, fast forward, now the Democrats are in the majority. Republicans aren't such a big fan of budget reconciliation. Democrats certainly think it's quite fine to use. And again, there's nothing wrong with using it. Both parties do. But when you're in the minority, you decide budget reconciliation is terrible until your party then goes into the majority, at which point you love it. But even with budget reconciliation, Democrats are held back a little bit because they need to keep all 50 votes together. And so folks like Senator Manchin from West Virginia, Senator Sinema from Arizona, two more moderate Democrats, incredibly important. Their votes are critical. And so, particularly Senator Manchin, you see him, in articles and quoted everywhere because Leader Schumer really needs to make sure that Manchin's on board of things. But don't sleep on Senator Sinema. She's pretty moderate as well. And although she's, not getting as much press as Manchin, she's just as important to get to those 50 votes. And on the Republican side of things, you have folks like Senator Collins from Maine, Senator Murkowski from Alaska, again, more moderate leaning Republicans. They become critically important as well for Democrats, because if Leader Schumer loses, let's say, Senator Manchin in a vote, but can pick up Senator Collins or Senator Murkowski, he can still cobble together the 50 votes that he might need. So again, not a lot of margin of error for both sides. And again, budget reconciliation, which is, it's not archaic, but it's a very process driven, a lot of rules around it. That's really where Democrats are looking to move legislation through. And so when you look at that time, or excuse me, that environment in DC, if you feel like President Biden is using executive orders, maybe more than other presidents have, you'd be correct. President Biden has been using executive orders on an accelerated basis. He's already issued 40 executive orders through his first 104 days. This chart shows, going back to President Reagan in 1981, shows how many executive orders each president since Reagan has issued in their first year in office. So President Clinton holds the record for executive orders. In 1993, he issued 56 executive orders. President Trump was no stranger to executive orders in his first year, issuing 54, but was well below the pace of President Biden, who already has issued 40 executive orders at this point. So I'm not saying executive orders are right or wrong or good or bad, but if you feel like President Biden has issued a significant number of them, he has, compared to his predecessors. And be interesting to see where he ends up, but it's likely that President Biden in his first year in office will issue more executive orders than any president before him. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just what the numbers show. So the last slide in this section is to give you a timeline of what you can expect for the rest of the year in terms of legislative changes. And this isn't gospel. It's not perfect, but it does give you a good sense based on, again, the dynamics in DC when we could see certain things happen. So if we take a step back, you'll remember on March 11th, President signed the American Rescue Plan. And you'll also remember that the American Rescue Plan used budget reconciliation to pass. No Republicans voted for it. Democrats used the budget reconciliation process for it to pass. Now, traditionally, you can use budget reconciliation one time a fiscal year. And so in 2021, the fiscal year runs all the way to September 30th of 2021. Fiscal year 2022 begins on October 1st, 2022. So the original thought process was, we're not going to be able to see tax legislation or infrastructure or another budget reconciliation piece of legislation until the fourth quarter of this year. However, you may remember back on April 5th, Leader Schumer goes to the Senate parliamentarian, and this is the most powerful person that no one talks about. Elizabeth McDonough is the Senate parliamentarian. She decides the rules of the Senate, and the Senate parliamentarian said, what you could do if you wanted is you could amend the 2021 budget resolution to have a second chance at budget reconciliation in fiscal year 2021. That's a lot of words. Like, what does that even mean? Well, what it means is that in fiscal year 2021, basically this summer, Democrats have the opportunity to pass another bill through budget reconciliation, and then potentially in the fourth quarter, pass a third bill through budget reconciliation. And so the timeline right now, or at least the target for Democrats, is they'd like to pass the infrastructure package through the House by July 4th. They'd like the Senate to pass the infrastructure package before the August recess, which is that first week in August. Now, this is a very aggressive timeline, but because the Senate parliamentarian said there's some additional opportunities to pass legislation, it opens up this window. And then once we get to October 1st, we go into that fiscal year 2022. There could potentially be a third time in calendar year 2021 that Democrats can pass budget reconciliation legislation. So this is a very aggressive timeline. But again, the reason I spent any time on this section, and we'll move on to the piece of the legislation, that is just to give you a sense of Democrats want to pass something, the tax increases, the infrastructure package this summer. They can do it alone. They can, as long as they hold the caucus together. Democrats, as long as they're together, can pass something through budget reconciliation this summer, and then have a third opportunity at the end of the year to potentially pass another piece of legislation as well through budget reconciliation. So the president certainly has talked a lot about bipartisanship, and certainly you've heard some Republicans make question some of the president's statements, because again, the Democrats seem to be aiming for a number of budget reconciliation opportunities. So again, a lot of process there, and I understand a little bit wonky and in the weeds, but again, it shows even though with that thin majority, Democrats do have some options if they're willing to go through the budget reconciliation process. But again, budget reconciliation can only be used for certain things, items that have a direct impact on federal spending. So if they want to have other types of legislation, they're going to have to find Republicans to get on board with them. But again, let's turn the page. We'll go back in time for a minute before we move forward. Just for a minute on the American Rescue Plan. Certainly all of you are familiar with this. Past March of this year, the recovery rebates, extended unemployment insurance to the end of September. Certainly the biggest benefit implication was the 100% COBRA subsidies. Now, just to be out front in this, I am an attorney, but I'm just a lobbyist. I'm not an employment attorney. Nicole's the one you want to go to for the real nitty gritty questions. But there's, there are a lot of compliance issues with the COBRA subsidies. There's potentially notification requirements. And, this is disruptive potentially because it's 100% subsidy. And, for those of you that remember back a few years ago in 2009, we had COBRA subsidies. Even back in 2002, we had COBRA subsidies, but those are both at 65%. This is 100% COBRA subsidy. That's the whole premium. Whatever the premium is, the government's going to pay 100% of that premium. And because the COBRA rules are all over, or have essentially been suspended because of COVID-19, and again, not an employment attorney, but generally speaking, you have about a year to elect your COBRA coverage versus the normal 60 days. That widens the window of who could claim COBRA. And then the way the law was written, it allows someone to elect COBRA starting April 1st, not have to elect from a period they were eligible for, and there's no back premiums to pay. So if I was laid off on December 1st, obviously outside of my 60-day window, but because of COVID-19, I have that about year period to elect COBRA coverage. I could go by former employer today and say, hey, I'm going to elect COBRA coverage as of April 1st or as of May 1st. And I'm not going to elect prior, and I'm not going to owe any back premiums. And I'm only going to stay in the COBRA. I'm only going to stay in your COBRA program while I had, or the COBRA program, while I have that full subsidy from the government. So the government tried to be as flexible as possible here. Again, fair number of notice requirements for you that Nicole would be able to, give you guidance, guidance on. But again, something certainly we have to be aware of. I will say we haven't heard yet any, at least I haven't from Democratic staff, any discussion of extending the COBRA subsidies. So they are, set to expire on September 30th. There is some discussion of should that federal unemployment benefit be extended past September, but it seems like those conversations are separate. I haven't heard anything about extending the COBRA subsidies, particularly at 100%, which is actually a pretty significant hit to the federal government. And it's estimated that 3 million individuals that normally would not elect COBRA will elect COBRA coverage because those subsidies exist. The other big benefit item, of course, was the FFCRA paid leave tax credits were extended and enhanced. Now, you'll remember if you have less than 500 employees, generally speaking, you were required to provide the COVID paid sick and emergency paid FMLA in 2020. That requirement ended in 2021, but you were able to continue to provide it if you wanted to, and still be eligible for those tax credits, the 100% offsetting tax credit. Those were extended until September 30th, and there were a couple additional items that were in there. And notably, you'll notice the president talking quite a bit recently about how small employers now have the ability, under 500 employers have the ability to allow their employees the day off, and the employee can get paid and the employer gets that tax credit. That's through this extension of the paid leave tax credit. So again, we'll look forward after looking past, but the president, what the president has been talking about and what we're hearing from Democratic leaders is the hope is this is the last COVID-19 package and that now we're moving forward. So again, infrastructure, we're turning the page on COVID-19 relief, and we're looking to the future, rebuilding, getting back to normal. So, knock on wood, I think we'd all be happy if this is the last COVID package. Things get back to normal. We can look at more maybe traditional legislative priorities. Now, infrastructure is, always something that Democrats or Republicans are interested in. This particular plan, the American Jobs Plan, is a little unique in that it has a $2 trillion of infrastructure spending. Now, this includes traditional infrastructure items like roads, bridges, airports. Expanding broadband has now become a traditional infrastructure item. So that is also lumped into that traditional infrastructure. Now, on top of that, though, the American Jobs Plan does have money to help long-term care facilities, child care facilities. So there's some non-traditional infrastructure in the infrastructure pack in the American Jobs Plan. What's very interesting, and again, depending on where you live, I'll send this link out to Nicole to send to you. There's the return of congressional directed spending. Now you might be like, well, what the heck is congressional directed spending? Well, that's what they call it when you're a member of Congress, but what most lay people call it is earmarks. And so earmarks are back. What are earmarks? Well, in the appropriations process, there's two ways that the government can appropriate money. Before 2011, Congress would pass an appropriations bill, and it would have a number of line items that would say exactly where this dollar amount was supposed to be spent. So let's say I'm a member of Congress. My district has a bridge that needs to be repaired. In the appropriations bill prior to 2011, I would try to get in a line item that would say $1 million for the repair of bridge in XYZ town. And then that would go in the legislation. Legislation was passed. And then $1 million would be sent to my town to rebuild that bridge. Well, in 2011, when Republicans took the House, they felt like earmarks, although both parties were using them, were really ripe for a lot of corruption. And so they banned the use of earmarks. And so earmarks essentially went away because the House wouldn't pass any legislation that had earmarks in it. Well, the Democrats have now decided that earmarks are coming back. Now, that's not a negative on the Democrats. A lot of Republicans want earmarks back as well. And so what we've seen is up to this point, members of Congress have submitted 318 earmarks for this infrastructure package, which again are line items that specifies a specific dollar amount goes to fix a specific or build a specific thing in a specific part of the country. Now, between 2011 and today, what Congress would do is they would say, we're going to, an appropriations bill would say there's $100 billion allocated to fix broken roads and bridges across the country. And then the White House, the Department of Transportation, Secretary of Interior, the different cabinet agencies would then decide where the money was going to go. And so both Democrats and Republicans in Congress say, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. We're the members of Congress. We should directly allocate where the money's spent versus just putting a big pool of money and then letting the White House decide where the money goes. The other part of earmarks, this is where I think Democrats are hoping they can pick a couple of Republicans up on the infrastructure package process, is let's say you're a Republican in Congress and you don't love the infrastructure package, but in the plan, there's $1.5 million to repair a highway in your district, and there's $2.3 million to repair a regional airport in your district. The hope is that because you have something that's going to come back to your district, maybe you're more willing to vote for the entire legislative process. You're more invested in the legislation because you know how it directly impacts your district. Now, I just want to be clear on a few things here. I'm not saying this is right or wrong or anything like that. I'm just telling you how it is. Earmarks are back. Democrats and Republicans are both submitting requests for them. And I think President Biden hopes that earmarks help. Again, if I'm able to get my earmark in and it's coming money to my district, maybe I'm more willing to sign on to legislation. I don't love the whole thing, but I love the parts that are going to help my district. So again, I'm just telling you how it is. Democrats and Republicans are both doing it. And again, today we just saw the list of the 318 members of Congress that that submitted earmark requests. Now, the flip side of the American Jobs Plan is it's a very expensive plan, $2 trillion. It's 100% financed through corporate income tax increases. Over a 15-year period, the Biden administration estimates an increase to a 28% corporate rate, trying to clamp down on multinational companies, potentially trying to shift money around to pay lower taxes, and also creating new minimum taxes for corporations. They think that will finance in full the $2 trillion package. Whether you're a large multinational corporation or a 10 person LLC, well, maybe not 10 person LLC, but a C corp, smaller corporation, the corporate tax rates would impact you. Certainly from a Sun Life perspective, I can only speak for my company on this. We don't really think that increasing the corporate tax rate, we don't think it's the right time to do that. The economy certainly is recovering, but there's no reason to potentially stall an economic recovery at this moment by increasing taxes on corporations. But we'll see what happens. We're certainly trying to talk to Democrats and Republicans about maybe that's not the best approach. And we also have discussed that infrastructure doesn't necessarily have to be paid for. It can be financed, and certainly corporate America is ready to buy bonds similar to what they did in 2009 with the American Reinvestment and Rescue Plan. Maybe it's a mix of corporate tax rates and bond issuances, but we don't think, as the president has proposed here, that there's a need to there's a need to pay for the entire package through corporate income tax increases. I think if I was a betting man, this particular proposal is the most likely to move through. Corporate income tax increases with traditional infrastructure attached to it. The second part of the president's plan, the president's has talked quite a bit about this during his speech, is the American Families Plan. And the American Families Plan is the human infrastructure or care infrastructure. And this is not traditional infrastructure, but this is where the benefits industry or the employee benefits offerings that you have for your employees. This is where we are most impacted. First, and we're going to get into a lot more details on this, the plan would create a national paid family and medical leave program, a 12-week national paid family and medical leave program that would apply to all working Americans, even gig workers. It would also provide 2 years of free preschool and 2 years of free community college to all Americans. It would cap the amount of childcare costs for low and middle income families. And there was some child and dependent care tax credits that were extended or increased, as part of the American Rescue Plan, it would make permanent those things. And there's some other items in there as well. Now, similar to the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan is 100% paid for. There is no financing of the American Families Plan, and it is paid for by individual income tax increases. And the tax increases are targeted. They would only apply to the wealthiest Americans. So the first increase would be the top tax bracket would go from 37% to 39.6%. So if you're on this call and you're making more than $518,000 a year and you're single, or you're making more than $622,000 a year and you're married, I don't fall into those tax brackets, but if sounds like a good problem to have. The top tax rate would go from 37 to 39.6%. Now, that's actually probably the least controversial part of this plan. The much more controversial part is capital gain rates would increase from 20% for Americans making more than $1 million to 39.6%. And actually, it's a little bit higher than that. It would be 39.6. I got to do math here. I'm writing it down on a piece of paper because I forgot to before. 43.4. So there's as part of the Affordable Care Act, there's a Medicare excise tax that's included on investment income of 3.8%. So really, it would increase the top capital gains rate to 43.4%. And then if you live in a state, not everyone lives in a state like Texas, no state income taxes. If you live in a state, maybe in the Northeast or on the West Coast, that's moderately high state income taxes as well, you could be looking at a more than 50% capital gain rate. And certainly, that's depending on your economic background and how you feel about taxing investment income. That's probably the most controversial part of the plan. It's just significantly increasing the capital gains rate. And again, capital gains would be on investment income that you hold for more than a year. So for example, I buy a stock, it's worth $100,000. A year later, it's worth $1 million. I go to sell it. There's $900,000 of long-term capital gains. Under the Biden plan, if I made more than $1 million a year, I'd be taxed at 43.4%, the 39.6 plus that 3.8% ACA investment excise tax. The other controversial part of this plan is the estate tax is not changed, but there is a change in the step up and basis rules, which seems complex, but actually it's not that it's not that crazy to understand. So same example I just gave you. So my parents buy a stock for $100,000. When they both pass away, it's worth $1 million. I inherit the stock. The way the rules are today is I inherit the stock at $1 million, that I inherit that $1 million stock, If I sell it the next day, I pay $0 in taxes. Why? Because I step up my cost basis to what it was at death. So my parents buy it for $100,000. If they were to sell it when it was worth $1 million, they'd have $900,000 of capital gains. But because they pass away, I get a step up in basis. My cost basis becomes the value with their death. And so if I sell it for $1 million, my cost basis is $1 million. I don't pay any capital gains. What the Biden administration is saying is, well, we're going to make changes to that in that every person gets $1 million of step up basis when they pass away. So right now it's unlimited. That'll be capped at $1 million per individual. And there's some other tax increases as well. Some of the way that hedge fund managers or investment managers are paid today are capital gains rates. Those would be switched to ordinary income. Certain real estate transactions that have some tax favorability, those would be capped as well. But again, this plan is saying we're going to pay for the human infrastructure, the paid leave, the free community college, all these things, by taxing the wealthiest Americans. And on the paid family medical leave in particular, this is where I want to spend a few minutes, because this has a huge impact for everyone that's on the call, including myself from the insurance company standpoint. So right now there's three groups that are all sort of dancing around each other, trying to figure out how to advocate for expanding access to paid family medical leave. So the first group are the advocacy community, the PFML advocates. So this is groups like the National Partnership for Women in Families, Moms Rising. These are generally non-for-profit organizations that exist to advocate for policies that primarily benefit lower income women and families. So having access to paid family and medical leave for all Americans is something that the PFML advocates very strongly are for. And so what they want to have happen is they want a national paid family medical leave program that covers every working American. So that's sort of their constituency number one. Constituency number two is the business community. And there's really, in the business community sort of has two aspects here. The one that's driving the conversation is the multi-state business community. So the largest companies in the country, the Best Buys, the Walmarts, the CVSs, right now, they're saying, hey, wait a minute. Today, there's 9 states and DC that have PFML programs in place. And this is getting, if you're a Best Buy and you operate in every single state, this is a lot of work. For those of you that, that run HR departments, it's hard to administer state programs that are all different. Every single state PFML program, and DC's program too, has different number of weeks, different way to calculate how much money employees are entitled to. Some of them have even different definitions for what the member of family means. And so what the big business community is saying is, we want to get rid of the state programs. And so we're willing to make a trade. We'll accept a national federal paid family and medical leave program if you get rid of all of the state programs. Well, the issue with that is the advocacy community, they want states to be able to create something that is even better than the national program. So the advocates are saying, let's create a national program, but if states want to do more, awesome. The national program is the floor and people can go higher. What the business community is saying, we can't have 50 different state PFML programs. Let's create one national program, and let's make it a good program. And that becomes the ceiling, and the states can't create any new programs after that. So again, the multi-state business community is saying, we'll trade one program to replace the 10 that exist today. Well, so you have organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is probably the most powerful business organization in the country from a lobbying and advocacy perspective. They're certainly not a progressive leaning organization. They're advocating for a national paid family and medical leave program. But again, one program that eliminates the state programs. The Business Roundtable, which represents the 30 largest employers in the country, they're advocating for a national program. So you have different constituencies that are advocating for these, for a national program. And then you have the insurers. And, we're sitting here and we're saying, like, wait a minute, we provide short-term disability insurance. And today, about 40% of American workers are covered by short-term disability insurance. And that's something that you as the employer, you either pay for your employees or you work with a company and through a group rate, you have them at a very affordable rate, be able to afford short-term disability insurance. And we're saying, why would you throw away the short-term disability market, which is a private market? Employers like yourselves, your employees voluntarily decide to pay for these benefits. Why would you sort of throw us out the window? And so we're working with Democrats and Republicans to say, if we're going to do a federal program, let's make sure we involve the insurance industry because we can be the foundation for any national program. So as you can see, a lot of different constituencies at play here. And the last thing I'll say here, but if I go into the specifics, this is not a Democratic issue. And I think Republicans have worked really hard over the past 10 years to make paid family leave, and particularly over the past 5, paid family leave a bipartisan issue. Because for a long time, it was an issue that Democrats sort of owned. But Republicans, if you think about under President Trump signed legislation that provided all federal workers, or 99% of federal workers, with 12 weeks of 100% pay paternity leave, or parental leave. So mom and dad, when there's a new child, birth or adoption, if you're a federal employee, you get 12 weeks of leave paid at 100%. Now that's not a full paid family and medical leave, but that is, that's not bad. 100% paid for 12 weeks. Under our Republican administration, Republicans passed a tax legislation that provided incentives for employers to provide paid family and medical leave. Now, again, I'm just saying this to show Democrats certainly have some ideas, but Republicans have ideas too. And so the point of all of this is we are closer to a national paid family and medical leave program than we've ever been. I'd say it's about a 33% chance, I think a 1 in 3 chance that we're going to see a national program this year. Because again, Democrats are pushing, Republicans are interested. So this is something that, and when you poll this, Democrats or Republicans, everybody loves paid family medical leave. Now, the specific proposal that's sitting out there today, this is from the Ways and Means Committee. So in the House, the Ways and Means Committee, critically important committee. The committee has jurisdiction over taxes, healthcare issues, paid family and medical leave. So the Ways and Means Committee's come out with a proposal that would say every working American is going to be provided with 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. And they're going to get it from either one of three places. Place A is the Treasury Department is going to create a new entity, which is going to run a federal paid family and medical leave program. Place number two is if you live in a state that has a paid family medical leave program, the state's going to provide you with those benefits. Option number three, if your employer provides you with the paid family and medical leave benefits that are equivalent to what the federal government's requiring, you can get that through your employer. And if your employer's paying for it, whenever there's a claim that's paid, the employer will get 40% back from the federal government. So in other words, if I was in Sun Life has a program, I go out on paid family leave. My claim is for $1,000. Sun Life pays me the $1,000. The federal government reimburses Sun Life $400, an incentive for Sun Life to provide that coverage. This is the leading proposal right now. The president has put out a proposal that is not as specific, but this is what this is shaping up to be. It's a 12-week program. Some things that I would watch as a if I was running an HR department and trying to figure out my benefits. And this is something talk to Nicole and team about. Looks like 12 weeks is going to be the number. At this moment, it does not appear that any size employer will be exempted. So whether you are self-employed, a gig worker, 10 workers, or 10,000, you will have to provide the 12 weeks. The income replacement is a progressive income replacement amount. So for those making under $1,200, is it a week or a month? $1,200 a month, you'd get 85% of your income replaced. For the amount you make over $1,200 a month, it would start at 75%, and eventually it would tier down. But it's a progressive wage replacement, and the definition of family is the chosen family definition. That is at least what's currently in the proposal. For those of you that have employees that live in states like Washington State or New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, chosen family is becoming a trend across the states. And that means you can care for your mom, your dad, sister, sibling, child, grandparent, and then chosen family is someone that you feel you have a connection to that is like a family member. And then the states define, what that means. Sometimes there's a financial relationship. Sometimes there's some type of long lasting relationship. But chosen family would be what the Ways and Means Committee is proposing. So what we want to watch here is if I'm in Texas and there's no state program, it's possible by the end of the year, I may have to build a program for my employees or go into the federal government's program. Now, again, I give this a 33% chance of actually making it through that whole process we talked before, budget reconciliation, all that ridiculousness. But this is a real thing. This is, for those of you that have, heard, anyone from Sun Life speak over the past few years, we have constantly been, raising the alarm about a federal paid family medical leave program. This is not a drill. This is real life exercise right now. Again, about a 33% chance that this could go through. And there's a lot of key players. For those of you that are in Texas, a big player here that's not on the screen is Congressman Brady, Kevin Brady from who represents part of Texas. He's the ranking member of the House Ways and Means Committee. So he's the highest ranking Republican. He's trying to work with the chairman of that committee, Richie Neal, to come to a conclusion. But if you have issues or you're concerned about a paid family medical leave program or have ideas, Kevin Brady's office, Congressman Brady, is certainly the person that you'd want to reach out to. And if you're in favor of that, same thing, let him know. Because the Ways and Means Committee is going to have a lot of power on this. But again, if you take nothing else away from the presentation today, talk to your benefits concept, consultant, broker, compliance, contact about, if I don't have a paid leave program in place today, how would this impact my business if it went into effect? And I realize, as we go to the last section here, as you look at the small business community, there are significant concerns about a number of things. The individual income tax increases could potentially hit small business owners, depending how your company is structured. The corporate tax rates could hit your business if you're a small business, depending on how you're structured. Certainly, while COBRA premiums are being paid for, whether you're fully insured or self-funded, having more employees come back to your plan than maybe you had anticipated, that could have a financial impact on your business, small or large. On top of that, certainly extended unemployment benefits, and people argue about, how much of an impact, but certainly have an impact on the employment environment today. And then potentially a paid family medical leave, not a mandate, but a paid family medical leave benefit being available to your employees. There's a lot of different moving parts here. And again, this paid leave one we want to pay attention to because it could move fast. And again, if it doesn't happen in 2021, we get, you can, if you're worried about this happening, you can, breathe a sigh of relief. If it doesn't happen in 2021 and you are a big proponent of a national paid family medical leave program, you'd be concerned. And the reason why this is the big year for all these things, tax increases, this social infrastructure program, is the 2022 midterms do not look good for the Democrats. And that is not a political statement. That is just when your party controls all three, the president, the House, and the Senate, it's just not a good, usually the first midterm, or let me take a step back. When your party controls all three chambers, it's really hard to roll that into a second term. But even more specific, and this chart here, there's a version, and if any of you have seen me present before, you've seen this chart before, there's a version of this chart in every single political consultant's office in DC, Democrat or Republican. Now the chart they have probably looks way better than this one, but what this chart represents is it shows the first midterm election after your president. So your very first midterm election going back to President Reagan, you can see that generally speaking, your party is going to lose seats in that midterm. So if you go back to Ronald Reagan, 1982, his first midterm, President Reagan, the Republicans pick up one seat in the Senate, not bad, but they lose 26 seats in the House. If you look at Barack Obama, President Obama, 2010, President Obama, Democrats lose 6 seats in the Senate, 63 seats in the House. President Trump, Republicans pick up 2 seats in the Senate, but they lose 41 seats in the House. So think back to the House. It's 218, 212. It's a 6-seat majority right now. And that's not a big majority. The only outlier here is President Bush in 2002. And that's the first midterms after 9/11. That's there's different circumstances there. So Democrats are very concerned about losing the House in 2022. And in the Senate, remember, is 50-50. So, they're concerned about that as well. So again, if you're President Biden or you're Senator Schumer, Leader Schumer, or if you're Speaker Pelosi, and you're looking at this chart and you're saying, you know what? We have an opportunity in 2021 to use budget reconciliation maybe 2 more times. And if we can, so maybe we want to use budget reconciliation to push as much of our priorities through as possible, because probably in 2023, Democrats are not going to control either the House or the Senate. So it's going to become really hard to pass legislation in the next 2 year cycle. So if you're Democrats, you're looking at this chart and you say, so maybe we try to pass as much as we can. On the flip side, you could look at this chart and say, you know what? This doesn't look great, but if we're able to show the American people we can work on a bipartisan basis, maybe we can hold the House and the Senate. So Democrats are also weighing, do we want to try to do infrastructure on a bipartisan basis? Because that would allow us maybe to show again that we're more willing to work, and that could potentially help us hold the House and the Senate, again, if you're Democrats thinking about this. So again, this is not about, politics. People don't love to talk about it, but when we think about the policies that we just talked about, potentially a national paid family and medical leave program, the advocacy community is saying this is our best chance. If we don't get this passed in 2021, we're not going to be in 2022. Once you get into calendar year 2022, the legislative cycle is going to move down because then you're in an election year, and then everyone's just focused on getting elected. The legislative pace will just, slow down immensely. So 2021 is really the year for things to happen. And then on the Senate side, we won't go through this, but Republicans have more seats up for re-election than Democrats. But both sides have some brutal races that they're going to be involved in. And so again, it's really more of a coin flip in the Senate. The House trending more towards Democrats, because remember, the Democrats lost 17 seats in the House in 2020, which, normally when you win the presidential election, your party, you're going to pick up seats in the House. This was sort of an outlier where Democrats picked up the Oval Office, but lost seats in the House. So I know we talked about a lot today. By the way, I'm a Boston guy, lost my accent, but I know I talk super fast. So when you put in the comments, I already know. Don't worry. I can't fix it. I've tried many times, but it's just not possible. But I squeeze in a lot of stuff, so that's kind of the trade-off. Talk fast, but try to put a lot in there. So yeah, I know we talked about a lot in a short period of time, but President Biden, just like President Trump, just like President Obama, just like President Bush, have all found that, campaigning is the easy part. You run around, you make promises, you say these things. Governing's the hard part, particularly where Congress you have very small majorities. It's difficult to move legislation. That's why the Democrats have been relying on budget reconciliation. And again, they have some windows to continue to do that. When we think about infrastructure, I'm so bored of saying the word infrastructure. It's all you're going to hear about through the fall, through the summer as Democrats try to push this through. President Biden is trying to work with Senator Capito from West Virginia, Republican. She has some some Republican infrastructure ideas. We want, the president's talked about wanting to be more bipartisan, but, at the end of the day, it does feel like to get those corporate tax rates through, it's going to have to be on a budget reconciliation item. So again, I think 50% chance that we see Democrats able to pass the traditional infrastructure package attached to the corporate income tax rates. I think it's a 33% chance, a little less likely that they're able to get the social infrastructure, the paid family leave, and the individual income tax increases, but we'll see. And again, not saying it's right or wrong, but don't forget about the fact that earmarks exist again. And so again, some members are going to be maybe more willing to support legislation because they're able to get specific projects for their districts. Again, not saying it's right or wrong, just how it is. And again, midterms only 557 days away. But they do have a real impact even today of how Democrats are thinking about their policy agenda. So yeah, I think, the key takeaways are, again, paid family medical leave, big deal. We got to be on the lookout for that because, again, this is the best chance for a national program. It would have an impact on all of us that are on this call today. In this summer, I think by August, we're going to have we'll really know if Democrats are going to be able or how much of the infrastructure package that they're going to be able to get through. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. A couple came in. Feel free to do that. Also, my contact information is there. You can definitely reach out after the fact and ask any questions that you have. But just a couple that came in. One is, James, you didn't talk much about the Affordable Care Act. What about the Supreme Court case that is pending? Yeah, that's a good question. The Supreme Court is, going to decide that case in June, probably. They'll issue their opinion. All I can say is that when I'm talking to Democratic and Republican staff, there's nobody in DC really worried that the Supreme Court is going to overturn the entire Affordable Care Act. Now, that doesn't mean they're not wrong. The Supreme Court is really has no leaks. It's the last institution on earth that does not have any leaks. It's incredible. But when you think back to that case, which of course Texas is the lead plaintiff on, Texas's argument is that with a $0 individual mandate, the entire ACA is unconstitutional. But it felt like from the questions at the oral arguments at the Supreme Court, which of course, you had more conservative justices, Kavanaugh, Roberts, Alito, asking questions about, can't you just say the individual mandate penalty is unconstitutional, but let the rest of the law remain? So it feels like, or there was also some questions if Texas and the other states even had proper standing to be able to bring the case forward. So again, just from reading the tea leaves of how Democratic and Republican staff are looking at this case, they're not worried at all. They're not looking at it a bit. So you have to presume, again, I don't think they know anything, but the presumption is the ACA, the individual mandate will be unconstitutional, but the ACA will continue on without the individual mandate. Okay, another question came in. Will the tax increases affect us in 2021? Retroactive. That's like a literally for some people $1 million question. It is possible to make them effective 1/1/21. However, it seems very unlikely that that Democrats would be able to, even within their own party, to get that to happen. So I think if you're you can feel mildly confident that the tax increases would apply 1/1/2022. Again, it's possible they could be 1/1/21 retroactive, but that'll make a lot of people angry. Even potentially, again, even within the Democratic caucus. So I think that would hold them back. And even on taxes, for example, just to piggyback on that question, then I'll turn over to Nicole to close us out. The caucus is split on a lot of things. I mean, you've certainly heard about the state and local tax deduction, the SALT deduction. Again, folks lucky enough to live in Texas, you don't deal with many state and local taxes, but generally you can deduct state and local taxes on your tax return. But that was modified in the 2017 tax cuts to limit the amount of state and local taxes that you could deduct. That really impacts the Northeast, and it impacts the coast as well, the West Coast, California in particular. Some New York members, Democrats, have said, we're not going to, vote for anything unless that SALT repeal is in there. It's called SALT, it's state and local tax SALT, unless that the SALT deduction limit is repealed. Then there are again many members of Congress, the Democratic Party, that are in seats that they're concerned about losing, and to provide a tax benefit that only impacts a small percentage of the population, depending on your geography. If you're trying to win re-election and show yourself to be an independent, you're Congresswoman Davids from Kansas, who's a Democrat, who's in a tough re-election race. Do you want to vote to give people in New York essentially a larger tax deduction? Hard to say. So again, I sort of piggybacked off that question, but yeah, for the tax increases, I think you're pretty safe banking on 1/1/22 if they do go through. It is possible 1/1/21, but I just don't see the appetite in the party. So Nicole, with that, I'll turn it over to you. I know we're close to time here, and I don't want to run over, but appreciate the questions. Again, if you have any other questions, feel free to shoot me a note. But Nicole, I'm assuming, Nicole, you're closing it out. Maybe you're not. Maybe I'm just closing it out.
I'm going to close it out for us, James. This is Sarah.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. So yeah, just quickly, thank you everyone for your attendance. Certainly, thank you Benefit Concepts for partnering with us to put on this webinar for everyone. We appreciate your attendance today. We will be sending out the presentation slides and the recordings, so look for that in your inbox soon. And Kirsten, did you want to say a few closing comments?
I sure did. James, I have seen you speak so many times, and I really
so boring, Kirsten. Oh my, you guys. Oh my God.
But we just so appreciate just your comments, your enthusiasm, just a wonderful lecture that you gave today, always enlightening. And let me just tell you, insurance is, and what we do is not boring, and that's what brings value to the people that we serve, because it's complicated and there's a lot to keep up with. And you're just a great teacher, and Sun Life, you're a wonderful partner. So thank you very much for hosting our call today, and we look forward to the next one.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.